The Dallas police officer that killed Botham Jean, Amber Geiger, has been fired. It was announced today that she was fired by the Dallas Police Department. I don't know why it took this long for them to fire her. Her story has changed 2-3 times since the evening in early September that she came back to her apartment. She lived right above Botham Jean. She's a 30-year-old white police officer. She was off duty at the time, and she basically saying that she wrongly thought she was going to her apartment, ended up intruding on Botham Jean's apartment, who lived directly under her, and then shot him dead. Botham Jean's funeral was recently held. There have been protests down in Dallas as to the fact, A, why is she not currently sitting in jail? She was let out. She was let out on $300,000 bond, and B, why has she not immediately been fired? So today we got one of those answers. The Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall. Renee Hall has fired an officer whom she previously said she could not fire. Amber Geiger, 30, who was charged with manslaughter in the fatal shooting of Botham Shem Jean on September 6th, was fired Monday. Geiger has said in the past that she mistook Jean's apartment for hers and opened fire because she believed Jean was an intruder. Geiger was fired because she engaged in, quote, adverse conduct when she was arrested for manslaughter on September 6th. An internal affairs investigation concluded, according to a news release from the Dallas PD. Geiger, who has the right to appeal her firing under civil service rules, was hired in November 2013 and assigned to the Southeast Patrol Division. Before being fired, Geiger told officers that while off duty but in her police uniform, she inserted a unique door key with an electronic chip into the door keyhole of what turned out to be Jean's apartment. The door, which was slightly ajar prior to Geiger's arrival, fully opened under the force of the key insertion, according to a search warrant affidavit. The affidavit says that the door being opened alerted Jean to Geiger's presence. It says Geiger described the apartment as being dark, and she thought, quote, she had encountered a burglar, which was described as a large silhouette across the room in her apartment. Geiger drew her firearm, gave, quote, verbal commands that were ignored by Jean, and then she fired 2 shots. Jean was shot once and died. That is the story from the Dallas Police Department. If you want to look at it, it took 2.5 to 3 weeks for them to fire this police officer. I don't know what took so long in their investigation, because her story changed from the evening it happened to after. At first, she said the door was slightly open, and she thought it was her apartment, and she thought it was a burglar. Then she said the door was closed. Other people who live in the apartment have come out with videos showing that the door could not have been left slightly open because they have very heavy doors that right when you open it, once you let it go, it immediately slams, so there's really no way to keep it, quote, propped open. There's also the issue that Botham Jean had a red, mat in front of his door, whereas Amber Geiger didn't. So wouldn't you recognize if you get to your apartment and the mat that you have isn't there? So there's a lot of things that don't make sense. I would say, number one, I tweeted this, and, it took so long for them to fire her, so spare me the, great for the Dallas PD. No, they fired her because they finally realized there is no amount of spin that they could put out there to cover for this police officer. Like, what could they possibly put out? They have already tried to smear Botham Jean by leaking to the media that he had pot in his apartment. So what? I've had pot in my apartment. Many Americans have pot in their apartments in places where it's not technically legal. So what? Does that somewhat tied to the fact that a police officer comes over and shoots you dead? So they were leaking that to try and smear Botham Jean. And this is what police departments generally do when they actually just straight up murdered someone and can't actually justify it. They try and basically defame the victim. We've seen that with Trayvon Martin. We've seen that, he's wearing a hoodie and he was up to no good. And we saw that with Michael Brown and many, many others. So bottom line, although, technically this is a good thing that they fired this police officer, she should have been fired the next day. She should not have been let out of jail. I think she was in jail for like not even 24 hours when she got out on $300,000 bond. You think a black cop would have been, an investigation would have happened for weeks before getting fired if a black cop off duty went and shot a white woman? Hell no. Do you think a black cop would have gotten out on $300,000 bond in less than 24 hours? Absolutely not. So this isn't just about Botham Jean. This is about our legal system or our injustice system. Because we don't have a justice system. We have laws for wealthy, mostly white, powerful, connected people, and laws for everybody else, and the police are also shielded from laws. 9.5 out of 10 times. So, an innocent man who apparently was a prayerful man, apparently wanted to, had aspirations of moving back to St. Lucia, where his family is from, and running running for public office there, who a New York Times story had come out this weekend, basically recounting that Botham Jean, for his entire life, did everything he could to avoid confrontation or interaction with the police, because he knew for black men, it's dangerous just being a black man in America, and you could get shot and killed by police if you have even one encounter. So he went out of his way to avoid encounters with police. He went out of his way to dress nicer than his friends. Instead of wearing a short sleeve shirt, he wore like a button down short sleeve shirt. So the question is, why did it take the police department this long to investigate it? And why did it take this long to fire the woman? You can't tell me it took 3 weeks to find out that she had no reason for doing this. Either you're going to say she had a mental break or some type of mental episode which caused her caused her to see things that weren't there, or caused her to forget time and place, or she just went and murdered someone. This is not manslaughter. That's what they're charging her with. This is murder. When you intrude on someone's home and you shoot them and kill them, that's murder. It would be murder for most people in America. Somehow she's being charged with manslaughter. So Paul says, hell no, imagine if a black cop does this. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to imagine it, because we know what would happen. So, so far, that's the update. She's been fired. Obviously, people are calling, protesters, activists, Black Lives Matter are calling for her to be thrown in jail and await trial. She is out on bail, out on bond. But we'll see what happens. There were protests where caskets were taken to a Dallas Cowboys game to symbolize Botham Jean. I've been trying to monitor what's going on with the protests down there, because I possibly would want to go down there. That's part of what this GoFundMe is for, so we have the funds to get down there and cover these important stories. I think the Botham Jean case could become as big as Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, where we saw protests in Ferguson for weeks, and other high-profile cases where, black teenagers or early 20s were killed for no reason by police. And this instance is particularly egregious because, black men that I've spoken with, including Ty, my photojournalist, has talked about, driving while black and, basically saying you're endangered just doing simple things while black. Well, what do you call, chilling on the couch while black now makes you an endangered species? It's insane.